Delta Squad was already fully formed, effectively, when I got to them. So it was like meeting them. And again, I know I keep going on about the cutscenes, but it was the cinematics that made them. I've seen almost none of the gameplay, remember, and I deliberately don't play the game. If I play the game, then I start to write as if I'm constructing a game. I have to see it from the outside and say, these are people I've met, what questions do I need to ask them to work out where they're going, who they are, and then to understand who they are and get in their head and do it. So it's very much watching them. It's exactly what any reporter would do, and obviously I was a journalist in a previous existence. So I'm observing them and I'm watching how they interact, the way they use language. I mean, there's some really telling things. There's a wonderful line in one of the games where they're looking for the junker and they're walking down the street through stranded territory, and Marcus says, "Are you sure this is going to work?" or something like that, and Dom turns around and says, "I won't let you down." He doesn't say, "Yeah, it'll be okay." He says, "I won't let you down," which tells you everything about that guy. It's a very pertinent answer to it. You see the things that they get annoyed about, you see the way they behave with each other. I mean, classic from the second game. Baird, who everyone treats as, you know, the sort of man who would rather talk to his pencil sharpener than another human being. There's some really touching stuff where they come out of the rockworm and they're covered in guts and everything, and in the background you see Bear sort of dusting down Cole's backside, wiping the gunk off him, and it's really touching. And I thought, oh, you know, he's not that hard, is he? He really cares about Cole. And there's all the little stuff, and I literally go through the cinematics like frame by frame, and I look for all the nuances and I look for the positioning of things. I mean, I'm an obsessive character. Everybody knows that. I can come out and say it, but that's how I do it. I think one of the assumptions that people who aren't writers make is that you draw from people you know. Now, I think people who've interviewed me before have said, "We didn't know you felt so strongly about this," but I really believe that filing the serial numbers off of real people makes bad fiction. For exactly the same reason, real life doesn't have to make sense, real people don't have to make sense. Having said that, I've got a friend back in the UK who's made a very good living out of detective novels, and he really does just file the serial numbers off to the extent he's had to move house because of a local gang lord that he's offended by depicting him a little too closely. And that works for him, but I still think it jerks the reader out of it. You want a character that's consistent with the world. So I take what I know of the real world, but not actually lifting people out of it. And I seldom have to lift situations out of it because the universe that I'm writing in does create its own sense of reality. It's got its own internal ecology of facts. And humans, of course, make the same screw-ups generation after generation. There are scenarios in my stuff that any Roman soldier would recognise because everyone's been through it. It's only the technology that changes. Now, there are things where I've picked up on issues that I think are quite interesting that I actively want to nod to, like the Pesang soldiers are effectively Gurkhas, and they behave like Gurkhas. And Hoffman has the same relationship with his Pesanga soldiers that white Gurkha officers have with their Gurkha troops, and that was quite satisfying to write. Because they are, you know, there is another group where they exceed fiction. What they do is beyond anything I can think of in fiction. The way those guys fight in real life and their heroism. I find that if you try to take people from real life, real people just aren't interesting enough. They really aren't. They've got too many messy bits that make sense in the sort of day-to-day context. But in fiction, you just think, well, why is that person doing that? Because that makes no sense. You know, it's got to be very, very consistent. Fiction is a different world. The truth in fiction is the way people are. The rest of it, you know, that's up for grabs. But you have to tell the truth in fiction. One thing I'm particularly gung-ho and very po-faced about is stereotypes. I will not do stereotypes, and I particularly will not do stereotypes of soldiers. Very few civilians now tend to have contact with people in the armed forces. They are fed a diet of totally unreasonable stereotypes about what it's like to be a soldier and what motivates you and what your relationships are like. And if I know the power of fiction, it is far more powerful than news. When I was in my spin doc days, we knew that we could slip something under the radar much more easily through fiction or trying to get product placement, ideas placement as opposed to product placement in something fictional than we ever could by getting it on the front page of a newspaper. So people tend to believe fiction because they're not expecting to be propagandized and they're not expecting the drip, drip, drip. So opinions get formed by fiction. I've done little tests and proved it. People form stereotypes of groups they haven't met, largely based on the way they see them on TV or in books or whatever. So one thing I absolutely don't compromise on is the soldier, as I depict them, everything I do is military fiction, is honest and true to the men and women in uniform. And the mail I get back tells me that I've done that, and that is my biggest reward, that I've told the truth. And I hope that readers now see soldiers as the people that they are. That's my serious moment. I do have them, you see. It's always difficult to ask a novelist who their favourite character is, because what we like about a character isn't necessarily what a fan would like. And there are always two halves to you as a writer. One is the craft side, what you enjoy doing, and the other is, would you actually sit on the bus next to this person if they were real? And they're not necessarily the same thing, because some of the most rewarding characters to write are the ones that you would shoot on site, you know, that you would move house rather than live near them. So I don't actually have a favourite character. They've all got their challenges. In terms of the ones that have given me most personal satisfaction in dealing with the challenge, there's Cole, because that's a sort of character I've not written before. And bear in mind for this, I'm writing in American and I'm English. Now, normally, if I'm creating my own characters for a franchise, I can get away with giving them any sort of speech pattern I want, but with this, I have to fit their particular speech pattern. I have to hear those voices in my head, which is one reason I don't listen to the audio books, because they're different voices, therefore the whole thing's different. I have to hear those same voices in my head. So just writing American English that matched those individual characters, because they got very distinctive speech patterns, was a wonderful thing to say, yeah, did that, can do it, fantastic. I felt really good about that. Cole especially, because he's got a particular style and the whole American jock sort of persona. We don't have that in the UK. That's a whole persona that we don't have. So I had to really get into and sort of find his depths, and I found him particularly rewarding. In terms of the characters that you think you might get on with in real life, I suspect I'd probably get on with Cole. I suspect I'd probably get really fed up with Marcus fairly quickly, like, you know, can you just stop grunting and say something for God's sake? I like Baird because Baird is a whiner like me. I've said this before, if we were at a party, it'd be me and Baird in the corner going, yeah, everyone's an idiot except us. In terms of my least favourite character, again, drawing the divide between the one that poses least challenges and the ones that I would run from if I met them. Funnily enough, the one that offers me least difficulty is Dom, because he is very much like other military solid characters that I've done before. I mean, every character is different. There is no sort of box of characters, because the way I deal with characters, whether I'm creating them or picking up someone else's, is to do the psychological profile thing. Is that I just need to know what made them who they are. So give me a few things from their childhood, and I can say, yeah, he would think that, he would do that. And it's very consistent and easy to do. I have to meet the characters for myself, so to speak. And I can meet them through the cinematics, because it's very clear from their body movements and the way they talk to each other and the beats and everything, what their relationships are. And that's summed up in seconds. So Dom was perhaps the one that I had to struggle with least, and I like struggling with my characters. In terms of people I probably wouldn't want to mix with socially, it'd probably be Prescott. And I know everyone thinks it's going to be Prescott, but for reasons that people don't imagine. I would just get into that sort of verbal fencing with him, because of the sort of jobs I've done, and I used to work with politicians far too often, and I would just get into that sparring with him, and I'd be caught up in his game. You know, so I'd probably shoot him, chainsaw him or something. I don't know. Neither. Cole or Baird? I mean, Cole's just fun. Baird, I think we'd understand each other. And let's face it, with his luck with women, he'd be grateful. And grateful's good in a man. Definitely not Prescott. Hoffman, possibly, if I'd had a few drinks. I'm not sure you can even run this, can you? Yeah.
You'll be surprised when we get up.
Yeah. See, Dom's problem would be he would keep calling you Maria at critical moments, and I couldn't stand that. And of course, Marcus would just be, it's just there, isn't he? No. Please don't think that I don't like Marcus. I started out feeling a bit like, Marcus is the sort of guy you would be very polite to and nod and move away from. But the more I find out what a tragic character he is, he's utterly tragic, and I really feel sorry for him. Now, he's just trapped in this really sort of emotionally constipated, cannot tell people the right things. I mean, it's heartbreaking, the end scene from Gears 2, where he's looking for Anya. Dom knows he's looking for Anya, and he almost cracks for a minute. This sort of creature that's been hidden since he was a little boy, and he had to keep the stiff upper lip, and do the right thing, and his parents were never around. And always off being scientists, and then when he sees her and his face lights up, it's just, ooh. So yeah, but definitely not husband material.